I live alone in a small house on the edge of town. It's quiet out there, with only a few neighbors scattered along the road. Most nights I love the stillness. It helps me unwind after work. But one Friday night, that silence turned into something else, something wrong. I remember the weather clearly. It was cold, with a light drizzle that made everything look washed out and gray. I locked the front door behind me, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen to throw together a simple dinner. I wasn't expecting anyone. My plan was to eat, watch some TV, maybe read a little and go to bed early. After I ate, I curled up on the couch under a blanket and started flipping through channels. Nothing grabbed my attention, so I put on a movie I'd already seen a dozen times. There's something comforting about knowing every scene before it comes. Halfway through, my eyelids started to droop. I was drifting off when I heard it, a faint scratching, like something lightly scraping along the side of the house. At first I dismissed it as the wind or a branch rubbing the siding. Then it came again, closer to the window this time. I sat up, suddenly wide awake, my heart pounding. The sound didn't fit the wind anymore. It was too slow, too deliberate. I muted the TV. The quiet in the room turned heavy. The scratching moved, now at the back of the house near the door. That's when it hit me. Someone was trying to get in. I stayed frozen on the couch, unsure what to do. I didn't own a weapon. My phone was on the kitchen counter, too far to reach without making noise. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, a raccoon or a stray cat. The scratching stopped. The house went dead silent. I held my breath, listening. Then the back doorknob rattled. Someone was testing it, trying to open it. Fear clamped down on me. I slid off the couch as quietly as I could and crept toward the kitchen, every step measured, careful not to let the floorboards creak. I needed my phone. I needed to call 911. But any sound might tell whoever was outside exactly where I was. I had just reached the kitchen when I heard it, the slow, unmistakable creak of the back door opening. That's when I realized I'd never locked it when I came home. My heart hammered against my ribs. I cursed myself for being careless, grabbed my phone with shaking hands, and ducked behind the kitchen counter. I dialed 911, fingers trembling. While the call connected, I heard footsteps on the floor, inside the house now. Slow, unhurried steps. The operator answered, but I didn't dare speak. I could only listen as the intruder moved from room to room, their steps echoing faintly through the walls, drawing closer. I whispered my address as quietly as I could, barely more than a breath, then hung up, hoping it was enough and that help would come quickly. The footsteps stopped just outside the kitchen. I held my breath, muscles locked, praying they would turn away. Instead, they stepped into the kitchen. I saw a shadow slide across the floor, moving toward my hiding place. I knew I couldn't just crouch there and wait to be found. My eyes darted around, desperate for anything I could use as a weapon. On the stove sat a heavy frying pan. I reached for it slowly, trying not to clang it against the metal. My fingers had just closed around the handle when the intruder rounded the corner and saw me. For a split second, our eyes met. His were cold and hard, the kind of eyes that don't hesitate. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes with a hood pulled over his head. Dangerous. That was the only word that came to mind. I swung the frying pan with everything I had. It connected with a sickening thud. He staggered back, grabbing his head. I didn't stay to see if he'd go down. I bolted from behind the counter and ran for the front door. Behind me, I heard him moving, getting back up. Panic surged. My hands fumbled with the lock, slipping on the knob as his footsteps pounded closer, faster now, angrier. At last the lock turned. I yanked the door open and sprinted into the cold night. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street. Only then did I look back. The house stood dark and still, as if nothing had happened. No sign of him at the doorway, no movement at the windows. Sirens wailed in the distance a few moments later. The police searched the house top to bottom, but the intruder was gone. They told me I was lucky to have escaped without a scratch. I didn't feel lucky. I felt violated, shaken to my core. That night changed everything. The silence I had once welcomed now made me feel exposed. Every creak, every faint sound, no matter how small, sent my heart racing. I kept waiting for that man to come back, for the doorknob to rattle again. I used to work long hours in a cramped, stuffy office, staring at a screen until my eyes burned. Weekends were my escape. I'd head to the mountains to hike, to breathe clean air, to get away from everything. Dense forests were my favorite, the deeper the better. Out there, far from traffic and voices, I felt alive. One weekend I decided to try a new trail a friend had mentioned. It was supposed to be harder and less used, which sounded perfect. When I got to the trailhead, the weather was cool, the sky clear. I packed enough supplies for the day and set off, confident I could handle it. The trail wound through thick trees and over rocks, twisting deeper into the forest. I didn't see another hiker. The quiet was almost eerie, just the occasional rustle of leaves and a distant bird call. It felt like another world. After a few hours, I reached a fork. One path was clearly marked. The other, narrow and rough, disappeared into darker, denser trees where the light barely touched the forest floor. Curiosity won. I told myself I'd follow the unmarked path only a short way, then turn back. The trail grew steeper and more tangled, then vanished altogether. I should have turned around then, but the pull of the unknown kept me going. I didn't realize how far off track I'd gone until the sky started to dim, and I had no idea where the main trail was. Panic started to creep in. I tried to retrace my steps, but in the fading light everything looked the same. The trees seemed to loom closer, the silence pressing in. I walked for what felt like hours, calling out in case anyone was nearby. No answer. My legs ached. I knew I needed shelter for the night. Just as I was about to give up hope, I saw it through the trees, a small cabin hidden deep in the forest. Relief crashed over me. I hurried toward it. The cabin was old, the wood weathered and the roof sagging, but it was shelter. Through a small window I saw the faint, warm glow of a fire. I knocked. After a moment the door creaked open. An old man stood there. He was ragged, with long, tangled hair and a beard that reached nearly to his chest. His clothes were torn, his eyes wild, like an animal that'd been cornered too many times. He stared at me without speaking, as if he wasn't sure I was real. "Please," I said. "I'm lost. I need help." When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "This place isn't for you. Leave now while you still can." His words sent a chill through me, but I was exhausted and completely turned around. "I don't know where to go," I said. "Please. Just for the night." He shook his head slowly. "If you stay, you won't make it out. This is my domain. I don't take kindly to intruders." Despite his warning, I couldn't bring myself to walk back into the dark forest. I thanked him anyway and backed away from the door. Instead of pushing my luck by staying inside with him, I decided to camp nearby. I found a small clearing not far from the cabin, set up my tent, and built a small fire. The night was unnervingly quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me into an uneasy sleep. I woke in the early hours of the morning with a strange, crawling unease. I stepped out of the tent and froze. The trees around my campsite had symbols carved into their trunks. Harsh, unfamiliar markings gouged deep into the bark. I didn't recognize them, but they filled me with a heavy, cold dread. As I stood there trying to make sense of it, I saw movement among the trees. The old man. He stood in the shadows, too far to see his expression, but I felt his gaze like ice. He watched me, unblinking, a still figure among the dark trunks. I called out to him. He didn't answer. He didn't come any closer. He just stayed at the edge of my vision. No matter which way I turned, whenever I glanced up, he was there, always just beyond the tree line, always watching. Fear took over. I packed my things as fast as I could. I had to leave. But no matter which direction I chose, I couldn't shake the sense of being hunted. The carved symbols appeared more and more often, like markers closing in around me. The feeling of eyes on my back never left. I tried to run, but the forest twisted strangely, paths looping and doubling back. Every time I thought I'd put distance between myself and the old man, I'd catch sight of him again, standing among the trees, always at the edge, never closing the gap, never letting me forget he was there. The forest wasn't random, not anymore. It moved with him. The realization hit me like a blow. I was trapped in his domain. The forest itself was on his side. As the sun began to set again, my strength gave out. The symbols on the trees, the oppressive silence, the old man's constant presence, it all pressed down on me. My legs shook, my lungs burned, and my hope bled away. I stumbled, then fell hard to the ground. I couldn't get back up. I was done. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the old man standing over me, his wild eyes gleaming in the fading light. He didn't have to speak. I knew what his silence meant. I had stepped into his domain, and I was never leaving. Before I tell you the next story, imagine this being read late at night on some small horror channel. If you were hearing it there for the first time, they'd probably tell you to subscribe, hit the bell for future scary stories, and share them with friends and family. They'd say they needed your support. Then they'd start this one. I was 18, working as a pizza delivery driver to help pay for college. It wasn't glamorous, but it was easy enough, and the tips helped. Most nights blurred together. Drive, deliver, listen to music, repeat. One night broke that pattern. My shift started like usual. I picked up a few orders, loaded them into my beat-up sedan, and hit the road. The weather was calm, the streets quiet, perfect for driving. On a long, empty stretch of road, I noticed something ahead. A car was speeding toward me, but its headlights were off. I could barely see it, just a dark shape rolling fast through the gloom. By the time I realized how close it was almost too late. I swerved hard to the right, tires squealing, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision. The car shot past me, still with no headlights, and vanished into the night. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but I forced myself to keep going. I told myself the driver was just reckless or drunk. I tried to forget about it. A few hours later, I had another delivery in a quiet neighborhood, narrow streets, old houses pressed close together. I parked in front of the address, grabbed the pizza, and walked up to the door. As I waited for someone to answer, I heard an engine behind me. I turned. The same car was parked across the street. This time the headlights were on, washing the pavement in harsh light, but the car just sat there idling. A chill ran up my spine. The door opened behind me. I forced myself to focus, handed the pizza to the customer, took the cash, and finished the transaction. My mind wasn't on the order, though. It was on the car. I walked back to my sedan, glancing over my shoulder. The other car stayed where it was, but I could feel someone watching. The second I started my engine, the other car roared to life. It sped straight toward me and screeched to a halt inches from my front bumper. The driver leaned out his window. He was a man with a shaved head and a deep scowl. His eyes were hard, cold, filled with something I couldn't quite name, rage maybe, or something worse. "Watch where you're going," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. I just stared, frozen, words stuck in my throat. He seemed to take my silence as an insult. "You think you're tough," he growled. "You think you can just cut me off?" Before I could respond, he slammed his hand against the side of his car. The bang echoed down the empty street, snapping me out of my daze. I shoved the gearshift into drive and took off. But he followed. His tires screamed as he hit the gas, tailing me close. The narrow road felt like it was closing in around me. I cut through side streets and alleys, taking sharp turns, trying anything I could to lose him, but he stuck to my bumper like glue. The chase felt endless. My palms were slick with sweat, the steering wheel slippery under my hands. In the rearview mirror, his headlights loomed, growing brighter, closing in. I didn't know this part of town well, but I used every bit of skill I had, dodging parked cars, taking corners faster than I should have, just to stay ahead. Finally, I saw a small park up ahead with a looped road around it. I swerved into the loop, and as soon as his car passed out of sight behind the trees, I killed my headlights and pulled over behind some bushes, tucking my car into the shadows. I held my breath. A moment later, his car roared past on the main road, speeding ahead. He hadn't seen where I'd gone. I sat there in the dark for a long time, heart racing, listening to my own breathing and the distant sound of crickets. When I finally eased back onto the road, the car was gone. I finished my shift, but my nerves never settled. Every time I rounded a corner, I expected to see his headlights in my mirror again. A few nights later, I did. I was on another delivery when I spotted the car parked at the edge of a neighborhood, half hidden in shadow. My stomach twisted as I drove by, praying he wouldn't recognize my car. The moment I passed, his engine started. He pulled out and began following me. I tried to stay calm and focused on the road, but my brain was spinning. There was no one around, no cars, no pedestrians, no one to help. I pulled up to my next delivery address. A man was already standing on the porch, waiting for his pizza. Desperation took over. I practically ran to him, thrust the box into his hands. "Please," I whispered, glancing back at the car at the end of the street. "Can you help me?" He looked from my face to the car and his eyes widened. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and pulled out his phone. The other car sat motionless at the far end of the road, idling, the driver staring in our direction. I felt trapped, like prey cornered with nowhere to run. The man on the porch spoke quietly into his phone, giving our location to the police. I tried to act calm, but I could feel myself shaking. After what felt like forever, I heard sirens in the distance. The car at the end of the street suddenly peeled away. The tires screeched and it disappeared into the night before the police arrived. I told the officers everything. They searched the area but didn't find him. They said they'd keep an eye out, but I knew he was still out there somewhere. After that, I never felt the same behind the wheel. Every drive felt dangerous. Every set of headlights in my mirror made my chest tighten. I never saw him again, but the memory of that chase, of his face and those headlights bearing down on me, never left. I worked the night shift at a small motel on the edge of a quiet town. It's the kind of place nothing much happens at, peeling paint, an old vending machine humming in the lobby, and the distant hiss of the highway. The stillness never bothered me. If anything, I liked the solitude. The late hours felt like the world was paused. Then the phone calls started. It began about a week ago. I was behind the front desk around 3 a.m., flipping through an old magazine when the phone rang. That time of night, calls are rare. I picked up. "Front desk, how can I help you?" No answer. Instead, I heard heavy breathing. Slow, steady, too controlled to be accidental. It crawled through the line. I waited, thinking someone might have dialed by mistake. The breathing continued, rhythmic and unnatural. "Hello, is anyone there?" I asked, trying to sound calm. The breathing stopped. I heard faint footsteps, as if someone were walking slowly across a wooden floor. Then the line went dead. A chill ran through me, but I shrugged it off. Night shifts attract prank calls, bored kids with nothing better to do. The next night, at almost exactly the same time, the phone rang again. This time there was no breathing, just whispers. Soft, layered, too far away to understand. It sounded like a conversation happening in another room, just beyond hearing. My heart picked up. I strained to catch a word, any word, but the voices were too faint. Then the footsteps came again, louder this time, approaching, until it felt like they were right there behind the desk with me. I slammed the phone down, hands shaking. I checked the registry. Only a few rooms were occupied, all of them booked by people I'd already seen and spoken to. The other rooms were supposed to be empty. The phone's display showed where the call had originated. Room 206, a vacant room. My stomach knotted. For the next several nights the calls continued. Each time the sound was different. Once it was a door creaking open. Another time it was the soft, eerie melody of what sounded like a music box playing a warped tune. One call was just faint humming, broken occasionally by those slow footsteps. Each time the call came from a different empty room, and when I checked those rooms afterward, I never found anything. Beds made, lights off, windows closed. But something would always be slightly off. A chair moved a few inches, curtains drawn just a bit too far. Little changes that felt like a whisper saying, someone was here. By the end of the week, every ring of the phone made my chest tighten. I started to dread the hours between 2 and 4 a.m., when the motel felt most abandoned. One night, after yet another call, this one from room 301, filled with nothing but the sound of faint static and distant footsteps, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed the master key and headed down the hallway. My footsteps echoed on the thin carpet. When I reached room 301, I hesitated, key hovering at the lock, then turned it and pushed the door open. The room was dark and cold. I flicked on the small nightstand lamp. Yellow light spilled over the bed, the dresser, the worn carpet. Everything looked normal at first. Then I saw the phone. It was slightly off the hook, just enough to break the connection. A shiver ran through me. I picked it up to hang it properly, and that's when I noticed the paper underneath it. I slid it out and unfolded it. It was a list of names, dozens of them, none familiar. At the bottom, in red ink, one word was scrawled, help. I backed out of the room, my mind racing, and shut the door. The next evening, when the owner, Mr. Charles, came in, I went straight to him. I told him everything: the calls, the sounds, the empty rooms, the note. For a brief second, his face drained of color. Then he forced a stiff, controlled look and waved it off. "Don't worry about it," he said, voice steady but oddly cold. "Probably just some old wiring issues with the phone system. I'll take care of it." He turned away too quickly. I couldn't shake the feeling he was hiding something. That night, I couldn't focus on anything else. I replayed our conversation over and over, wondering what he knew that he wasn't saying. Right toward the end of my shift, the phone rang again. I stared at it for a long moment before picking up. "Front desk," I managed, my hand trembling. Silence. Then I heard a voice. Faint but unmistakable. It was Mr. Charles. He sounded distant, muffled, like he was speaking from the other end of a long hallway. The phone's display showed the origin of the call. Room 308. A room at the very end of the corridor. A room I had never seen anyone enter. A room that, as far as the system was concerned, wasn't supposed to be rented out at all. The line went quiet. I dropped the phone. I didn't lock up. I didn't check out. I just ran down the hallway, out the front door, into the cold night air under the pale moonlight. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the road. I never went back to that motel. Whatever was in room 308, whatever Mr. Charles wasn't telling me, was far darker than anything I wanted to understand. In my early 20s, I used to hitchhike a lot. It saved money, and I liked meeting strangers and hearing their stories. Most rides were uneventful, awkward small talk, maybe a few laughs, then they dropped me off and drove away. One night changed all that. It was a cold autumn evening. I was standing on the side of a lonely road, the sky a deep purple after sunset. I'd been waiting nearly an hour. The cold was sinking through my jacket, and I was starting to think I'd have to sleep outside. Then I saw headlights approaching. I stuck out my thumb. An old, dark sedan slowed and pulled over. I jogged up to the passenger side and leaned down to look in. The driver was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and tired eyes. He looked ordinary, harmless. I opened the door and climbed in. "Where you headed?" he asked, voice low and rough. I told him the name of the town I was aiming for, about 50 miles away. He nodded. "I'm going that way." "Thanks," I said, relieved, and buckled my seat belt as he pulled back onto the road. At first, we rode in silence. The only sounds were the engine and the tires humming over the asphalt. I watched the dark shapes of trees blur past the windows, trying to relax. Still, something about him put me on edge. Maybe it was the way he kept flicking his eyes toward me, or how his hands clamped the steering wheel too tightly. I couldn't quite figure it out, but the uneasiness was there. That's when I noticed the box. In the back seat, almost hidden low beneath a thick, dark blanket, was a large box that took up most of the space. I hadn't seen it when I got in. Now that I had, I couldn't stop glancing at it. The driver must have caught me looking. "Just some old stuff," he muttered, voice suddenly tense. I nodded, not wanting to pry, but my curiosity sharpened. Old stuff big enough to fill half the back seat covered with a blanket. The cramped car felt heavier. I shifted in my seat trying to get comfortable, but the air seemed to thicken. Then I heard it. A faint, muffled sound from the back seat. So quiet at first I thought I'd imagined it. Then it came again, soft, stifled, like something was trying to move or make a noise from inside the box. My heart thudded. "Did you hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hear what?" he replied flat. "I thought I heard something from the back seat." "Just the road," he said quickly. "Nothing to worry about." But I was worried. A cold sweat prickled the back of my neck. The muffled sounds grew a little louder, more insistent. Whatever they weren't mechanical. I needed to get out of that car. I glanced at the door handle, calculating. We were on a deserted stretch of road. No lights. No other cars. Jumping out could get me badly hurt. But staying suddenly felt worse. As I debated, the man started humming. A low, eerie tune, off-key and unsettling. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, the tendons in his hands standing out. The humming grew louder, faster, as if something inside him was winding tighter and tighter. I reached for my phone, trying to be subtle. He saw. His eyes flashed. His hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. "No phones," he hissed, voice sharp and dangerous. I jerked my arm away, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The car kept rolling down that empty road, his hand now back on the wheel, knuckles white. The sounds from the box were clearer now, urgent, desperate. I made up my mind. I took a deep breath, unbuckled my seat belt and grabbed the door handle. He noticed. "Don't even think about it," he growled. I didn't listen. I yanked the door open. Cold night air punched into the car. He lunged for me, but I threw myself out, hitting the road hard. The impact knocked the air from my lungs, and I rolled across the rough asphalt, skin scraping, body screaming. Behind me, the car screeched to a stop. I heard him yelling something, but I didn't look back. I pushed myself up and ran. My legs felt like they might give out, but I forced them on. The cold burned my lungs, but fear burned hotter. I ran until I had nothing left, then collapsed by the side of the road, gasping. I stared back along the highway, expecting to see his car coming after me. Nothing. Only the wind and the dark line of trees. I don't know how long I sat there, shaking. Eventually, another car appeared, a woman driving alone. She slowed when she saw me and asked if I needed help. Every instinct screamed not to get in another stranger's car, but I had no other choice. I climbed in, and she took me to the nearest town. The whole ride, my mind stayed stuck on that box, on the sounds I'd heard. I never found out what was inside. I'm just grateful I never had to. A few weeks ago, my friends and I planned a weekend hiking trip. We were all college students, stressed and worn down from exams, desperate for a break. There were 4 of us, Jason, Lena, Alex, and me. We picked a forest known for its scenic trails and quiet atmosphere. It sounded perfect. We arrived early Saturday morning, buzzing with energy. The air was crisp, the sky clear. We parked at the trail entrance and started off, talking and laughing as we wound deeper into the woods. The trees were tall and thick, their leaves rustling softly overhead. Sunlight filtered through the branches, sprinkling the ground with shifting patches of light and shadow. We lost track of time. We wandered off the main path here and there to explore, a hidden stream behind some bushes, a rocky outcrop with a beautiful view over the forest. Hours slipped by. By the time the sun started dipping, we were far from the entrance. "Maybe we should head back," Lena said, checking her watch. "It's getting late." We all agreed. None of us wanted to be in the forest after dark. We turned around and started walking the way we thought we'd come. That's when we realized something wasn't right. The path didn't look familiar. The trees all seemed different. The more we walked, the less anything looked like what we remembered. It dawned on us slowly. We were lost. As the remaining light drained from the sky, panic started to simmer under the surface. We tried to stay calm, promising each other we'd find the trail again if we just kept moving. Then the sun disappeared completely. The forest changed. The comforting rustle of leaves and birdsong vanished. The trees became black shapes looming in the beams of our flashlights. The darkness pressed in from all sides. We swept our lights around, but everything looked the same: endless trunks and undergrowth, no sign of a marked trail. We kept walking anyway, hoping. The night air grew cooler, and a thick silence settled over the woods, broken only by the crunch of leaves under our feet. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. At first, we thought it was just the echo of our own steps bouncing back from the trees. But the longer we listened, the clearer it became. The sound was behind us. Slightly out of rhythm with our own, we stopped. The other footsteps stopped too. Alex swallowed. "Did you guys hear that?" None of us answered, but our faces said enough. We stood there in the dark, listening. Nothing. We told ourselves it was our imaginations and started walking again. The footsteps returned, always behind us, always matching our pace. When we slowed, they slowed. When we stopped, they stopped. Whoever or whatever it was wanted us to know it was there. Our pace quickened. We spoke in hushed voices, trying to stay calm, but fear bled into every word. The footsteps drifted closer. The darkness around us felt heavier, like the forest itself was watching. Jason, who was leading, suddenly froze. His flashlight beam locked on something ahead. We followed his gaze. A man stood among the trees a short distance away. He was tall, his clothes dark and blending into the shadows. It was like he had been carved from the night itself. He didn't move, he didn't speak. He just stood there, watching us with a stare that crawled under my skin. We didn't ask who he was or what he wanted. We ran. Branches whipped at our faces as we stumbled through the undergrowth, tripping over roots and rocks, our flashlights bouncing wildly. We didn't care which direction we went. We just wanted away from him. But no matter how far we ran, we couldn't escape. Every time we thought we'd put distance between us and that figure, we'd catch glimpses of him again, through the trees, ahead of us now, or off to the side. Always just far enough that we couldn't make out his face. Always watching. It felt like we were running in circles, looping through the same stretches of forest, trapped in some invisible pattern he had laid out for us. Our fear turned to full-scale panic. We realized we weren't just lost in the woods. We were being herded, our legs burned. Breath came in ragged gasps, but we kept going, driven by pure survival. Then Lena screamed. She'd gone down hard. When we reached her, we saw why. A thin wire was stretched low across the ground, almost impossible to see in the dark. It was a trap, deliberately placed. My heart slammed against my ribs. This man hadn't just followed us randomly. He'd prepared the forest, set snares, turned the woods into his hunting ground. We got Lena back on her feet and pressed on, this time watching the ground as carefully as we could while still moving. Every shadow, every fallen branch felt like a threat. Every step could be another snare. The man never spoke. He never rushed us. He was patient, relentless, always there at the edge of our vision, letting our fear do the work. Eventually, our bodies gave up. We stumbled into a small clearing and collapsed, chests heaving, muscles trembling. We couldn't run anymore. The footsteps stopped again. The forest went silent. We huddled together, too afraid to move, knowing he was still out there, watching, waiting. The trees around us felt like walls. In that moment, I understood something that froze me more than the cold air did. We weren't just lost in the forest. We were lost to it. He had driven us here, broken us down, and now we were trapped in his territory. The forest was his maze, and we had never stood a chance. I used to work as a night security guard at an old abandoned factory. It was a huge, decaying building. Broken windows, rusted machines, dust thick on everything. The place had been closed for decades, but the owners still wanted someone on site at night, just in case anyone tried to break in for scrap or shelter. They hired me for the night shift. At first, it was dull but easy. I'd walk the long, dark corridors, my footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The only sounds were the wind whistling through cracked windows and the occasional groan of the building settling. I'd listen to the radio or read to pass the hours. Then small things started to bother me. One night I noticed a door I was sure I'd closed earlier was slightly open. I figured I'd just forgotten to pull it shut all the way. No big deal. The next night it happened again. That same door, which I remembered closing firmly, stood ajar. I told myself it was just old hinges, a draft, something simple. Then came the noises. Around 2 a.m. one night, I was making my rounds when I heard a faint rustling coming from one of the storage rooms. It was so soft I almost dismissed it, but it came again, like someone shifting around in the dark. I froze. No one else was supposed to be there. I was alone. I walked toward the storage room, flashlight beam steadying me. The rustling stopped as I got closer. The door was closed. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. The room was empty. Shelves, old crates, nothing else. I swept the flashlight across every corner. No one. I told myself it was just the building again, sounds bouncing strangely in the empty halls. But the next few nights proved otherwise. The noises grew louder, more frequent. Footsteps echoed down hallways when I knew I was alone. Something scraped against the concrete, like metal being dragged slowly across the floor. Once I heard whispering, too faint to make out words but unmistakably voices. Whenever I tried to follow the sounds, they would stop just before I got there, leaving me in heavy silence. Then I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye, a shadow slipping around a doorway, a flicker of movement at the far end of a hall. Every time I turned my head, there was nothing there. My nerves frayed. I jumped at every sound. I knew something was in the factory with me, but I didn't know what or where. I decided to set up cameras. I placed them in the spots where I'd heard the most noise or seen movement, hoping to catch whoever was sneaking around. At the end of my shift, I went back to the small security office and pulled up the footage. My stomach twisted as I hit play. For a while, everything was perfectly normal, empty corridors, still rooms, grainy images of nothing. Then on one of the feeds, something slipped into view at the edge of the frame. A figure, tall and impossibly thin with long, spindly limbs. Its movements were wrong, jerky, like a puppet with tangled strings. It drifted through the building, always just barely in sight, never fully in the frame, as if it knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid them. It didn't move like a person. It didn't look like one either. It seemed to blur into the shadows, half there, half not. It showed up on nearly every camera at some point in the night. Sometimes behind a stack of crates, sometimes at the far end of a hallway. Always in the background, always watching. As I watched the footage, I realized with a sick drop in my stomach that it had been near me all night, following my route at a distance, staying just out of sight whenever I turned a corner. Something in me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending it was just the building. I had to leave. I stood up from the desk, ready to walk out and never come back. Then a loud crash sounded in the hallway right outside the office. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly opened the office door. The hallway was dim and cold, the air heavier than before. I listened, hearing only my own breathing. The sound had come from near one of the old storage rooms. I moved toward it, each step feeling like it carried me deeper into something I didn't want to meet. The closer I got, the colder it felt, a chill that seeped through my clothes. The storage room door was wide open, creaking on its hinges. I pointed my flickering flashlight inside. The room was empty, except for the floor. Carved into the concrete in deep, jagged lines were strange symbols, twisted shapes and markings I didn't recognize. They looked old, deliberate, wrong. My skin crawled. As I stared at the carvings, I felt it, a presence behind me, cold, heavy, watching. I turned slowly, my flashlight shaking. It was there. The figure from the footage stood in the hallway a few feet away. Its face was swallowed by shadow. It didn't move. It didn't speak. But the sense of being observed, studied, was overwhelming. I didn't wait to see what it wanted. I ran. I sprinted down the corridor, my footsteps echoing wildly. Behind me, I heard its steps, slow, measured, like it knew I couldn't outrun it for long. I burst through the factory's front door and into the cold night. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands fumbled with the keys, but I got the engine started and tore out of there. I quit the next day. I dropped off my uniform and keys and didn't look back. I don't know what that thing was. I don't want to know. All I'm sure of is that it was waiting there in the dark, and I was the unfortunate one who finally noticed it. I used to work for a delivery company. The job was simple: drop off packages, collect payments, move on to the next address. It wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills. I mostly worked during the day, but sometimes I picked up night shifts when things were slow and I needed extra cash. That's when it got dangerous. One night I was assigned a delivery in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The houses were old, the street quiet in a way that felt wrong. No kids playing outside, no TVs glowing in windows. Just stillness. I told myself it was just another stop. The house matched the address on the package. The paint was peeling, the windows dark and empty. I checked the label again. It was correct. I took a breath, grabbed the package, and walked up to the door. The uneasy feeling in my gut grew stronger with every step. I knocked. After a few seconds, the door creaked open. Two men stood there. Both were shorter than me, but something about them put me on edge. One of them had a gun. Before I could react, they grabbed me and yanked me inside. I stumbled into a dim parlor that smelled of dust and stale air. The door slammed shut behind me. They shoved me to the floor. My heart pounded as I looked up at them. The one with the gun waved it in my face, making it clear I wasn't going anywhere. The room felt like it was shrinking. Breathing got harder. They didn't waste time. One kicked me in the side, knocking the air from my lungs. As I tried to suck in a breath, the other punched me in the face. Pain exploded along my jaw. I tasted blood. Blow after blow rained down. I curled up, trying to protect my head, but there was nowhere to go, no one to help. Each hit sent shockwaves through my body. While I lay there, they rummaged through my pockets. They pulled out my wallet and emptied it, taking every bill I had. They searched my jacket and took whatever they could find: cash, phone, anything of value. When they were done, I tried to push myself up, but the pain made my arms shake. My whole body felt bruised and heavy. The man with the gun grabbed a fistful of my shirt and hauled me up so our faces were inches apart. "If you tell anyone," he hissed, his breath hot and sour, "we'll find you. We'll find your family. We'll kill you all. Understand?" I nodded, barely able to move my head. The threat hung between us, heavier than the gun. They weren't just robbing me. They were making sure I stayed silent. Satisfied, he let go. I fell back to the floor. I heard the door open, then close. Their footsteps faded. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at the cracked ceiling, trying to process what had happened. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. Every movement hurt. My ribs ached, my face throbbed. But I knew I couldn't stay there. They could come back. I stumbled out of the house and into the cold night. The street was as empty as before, but now it felt hostile, like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath. I limped to my car, each step a reminder of every kick and punch. When I finally reached it, I collapsed into the driver's seat and just sat there, shaking, trying to steady my breathing. I thought about going to the police, about telling them what had happened, giving them the address, letting them deal with it. But their words echoed in my head: "We'll find you. We'll find your family." The fear was suffocating. In the end, I started the car and drove away. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't want to see it again. When I got home, I went straight to the bathroom. The mirror showed a swollen face, split lip, bruises already forming. My clothes were torn and dirty. I cleaned myself up as best I could, but no amount of scrubbing could erase the feeling of their hands on me or the sound of their voices in my ear. I called in sick the next day. I couldn't bring myself to get back in the van to knock on another strange door. I spent the day in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that night. Days turned into weeks. The physical pain faded, the bruises turned yellow and disappeared, but the fear stayed. I became jumpy, always scanning my surroundings, always watching for those faces in a crowd. Every knock at my own door made my stomach twist. I never told anyone what happened. and I never stopped feeling like they might show up one day, just to prove they could.